And as Karen mentioned, for our time together today, it is very helpful if you have any questions or comments as we go along to be able either to ask them or to be able to type them into the chat box, and then we can have more of an interactive session today. So that is great. Just a very brief background about myself. I'm a licensed clinician that works with organizations as well as individuals to better foster balance between work and life issues. Okay, so I'd like for us to start today to think about what is a healthy workplace. What does that mean, and what are the roadblocks to establishing a healthy workplace? We know that there are many circumstances that are beyond our control, especially in the workplace. And this program will look at some of those conditions and will focus on some of the things that we can control in order to establish a healthy workplace. And so what we're going to look at today is we're going to talk about how to cope with some of the changes that impacts all aspects of life. We'll be able to identify what some difficult workplace issues are and how to be able to recognize if there is an escalation of these issues and then what to do. We'll talk about practicing some positive communication techniques and some conflict resolution skills. And really overall to better understand how each member of the work team is responsible for his or her part and being able to work together to develop a plan for workplace health. So I'd like for everyone to just think about at least one major work-related change that you have experienced over time at any point in time. And again, if folks want to just type into the chat box feature, you can do that. I'm just noticing here, we're on all attendees, but if you want to type the message privately, you can do that as well. And so to think about any kind of work-related changes, I'm going to invite you to think about the following questions. Was it a surprise? How much input did you feel that you had in deciding the change? What was the impact, or how were things affected? What's the difference between change and transition? And is transition a gentler process, and what are the reasons for that? So change occurs when something new starts or something previously that has taken place stops. And transition is really a gradual process through which individuals and groups can reorient themselves so they can really function or operate and give meaning to a change. So it's really more of an evolutionary process. So what's important here to keep in mind is that our individual attitudes, both in general and towards any specific identified change, will really impact how we deal with that process. So as we can see here, attitude is everything, or at the very least, we can say that attitude is certainly significant. And as part of our discussion today, I'd like for you to think about how change happens and some of the steps that make it easier to be able to accommodate the changes that occur. So being able to anticipate change if possible, to be able to kind of get yourself mentally prepared for that shift. To think about monitoring the change and being able to check in with yourself and asking yourself the following questions. How do I feel about the change or certain aspects of the change? And then by asking questions, where can I go? What do I need to move forward? Thinking about adapting to change and being as flexible as possible. Acknowledging that the change will happen. And then keeping in mind that change is a part of life and that change will occur again and again. So this is not to say that people don't have questions or also don't go through some emotional changes or a process about the loss of the way things were. Okay? So being able to acknowledge what the losses are is critical, really, to all human experiences. So we need to find ways to address that as well. And so just thinking about, as we just talked about, how change happens and thinking about that it's a process and that there are different stages that occur, it really can help us to be able to feel more ready and more prepared and less resistant to the change. So sometimes we're faced in the workplace with activities that undermine workplace health. And I'm going to ask folks to think about, again, the following question. Have you experienced any of these in your workplace? And if so, what was the impact? So either people can, chime in, or if you'd like to, again, be able to privately, type your message in, and then as we go along, I could address any of those comments. So if we really start looking at what's on the slide, disrespect, substance abuse, harassment, violence. I mean, those are all situations that occur that can be frightening, for people to think about how to manage or even what steps to take, in those different scenarios. So, in terms of thinking about harassment, this doesn't refer to behaviors only that are of a sexual nature. It does not always cross genders, and it actually can show itself in many different areas and in many different ways. And so let's just take a look at the following, some of the following definitions of harassment. Okay, so these definitions are being brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Their guidelines in understanding and responding to violence in the workplace. So if we look at the definition, harassment is intimidating or harassing behavior. These are threats or other conduct which in way creates a hostile environment, impairs operations, or frightens or inhibits others. Harassment can also include psychological factors such as intimidation, and this could include making statements which are false, malicious, disparaging, derogatory, rude, disrespectful, abusive, obnoxious, insubordinate, or which have the intent to hurt others' reputations. There is also physical intimidation, which may include physically holding or impeding or blocking movement, following someone, touching, stalking, or any other inappropriate physical contact or advances. So let's work through some possible case scenarios, and we'll look at these together and see whether or not these categories or these case examples would fall into, the harassment category and, how we would even recognize that or handle that. And in addition, I can mention as well that you will have access after today's presentation. There is a guide that we'll talk about at the end that if you wanted to read more and get some more additional resources, we'll talk about your Employee Assistance Program and how to get some additional resources to further your learning after today's webinar. So if we just take a look at this first case example, we have Jack overheard two of his coworkers, Sharon and Michael, laughing quietly, whispering, and flirting with each other. The next time he passed Sharon, Jack winked and said, "Hi, sweet thing," and looked her over, all in a joking manner. Sharon was angry and offended and told him so. Okay, so these are typical case examples. I just want to just reiterate that this isn't any real-life people, but these are some like typical case scenarios. So I'm going to invite people to, again, if you'd like to add your comments or questions in the chat box, feel free to do so. So we have this first scenario. What would this be considered? Is this considered harassment? And the answer here is actually no. It would be more appropriate to label this potential sexual harassment. It is subtle behavior and should not necessarily be called harassment the first time it occurred. However, Jack should not repeat the behavior in any form since Sharon has told him that she is offended by it. So let's see if we look at another case scenario here. When Tom gets his work group together for their monthly planning session, he always asks Marilyn to take notes and handle the refreshments. His work group consists of 3 administrative assistants, Marilyn, James, and Frank. Is Tom harassing Marilyn? So here it's no, not technically. It's better to think of this example in terms of a discriminatory job assignment and sexual stereotyping unless there is a legitimate reason for her always to be selected for coffee making, such as less seniority or a lower job category than the 2 men. The claim that she likes to handle the refreshments, that she has not complained about it, or that she makes better coffee is not a sound reason to engage in what appears to be stereotyping. If Marilyn is being treated differently from her peers in other aspects of her job, it may be a discrimination issue. So let's take a look at another scenario. Throughout the day, Bob has to drop by the job site to oversee the work of his crew, which is made up of 3 women and 8 men. When he passes Kathy or Shirley, he occasionally pats one of them or gives them a little pinch or hug. He has never said anything really sexual to either of them, and they've never objected to his occasional touches. So based on the limited information given in this example, yes, we could look at this as Bob's behavior is physical. It looks suspiciously like it might be sexual in nature, for example, little pinches where, and is directed only at 2 of the women, but only at women and not men, and it's repeated. So additionally, Bob is a supervisor, which makes the power differential a factor as well. So, and I just want to also make a note here that some of these examples, may or may not specifically apply to your particular work setting or to every work setting, but these are typical scenarios or some parts of this that often comes up that people have questions about. Charlie really likes his employees and makes it a point to treat everyone the same. He especially likes to joke and tease in what he feels is a good-natured way. He makes comments like, "How's your love life?" But Charlie would never be lewd or offensive. None of his employees have ever objected, and sometimes they laugh. Is this sexual harassment? Most likely, this is an example of subtle sexual harassment. Charlie is a supervisor, so he's in a power position. And he's engaging in this behavior with his subordinates, male and female. but the statements that sometimes they laugh can indicate that sometimes they don't laugh because they don't like it. He may be harassing both men and women, even if it's unintentional. Charlie needs to be told that it is not appropriate behavior. So we have two more case scenarios here. Last night, Roger went to a business meeting arranged by his boss, Marie. He expected the whole office staff to be there, but it was just two of them. The restaurant was dimly lit with a very romantic atmosphere. After a few drinks, Roger realized that the only business to be discussed was Marie's attraction to him. So just before suggesting that they go to her house for a nightcap, she mentioned the promotion Roger was applying for. So before I respond, I'm just going to give folks a moment here to type into the chat box. Do you think, yes, this is harassment, or no? Based on some of the case examples that we just went through, if people want to privately type that in. Yep, I see some comments coming in here. Yep, I see a bunch of comments coming into the chat feature. And, yep, I see more yeses. I see a no. But, yes, this would be considered sexual harassment. Marie has made it clear that there is a connection, and this is the reason why, between Roger's response to her invitation and his getting a promotion. So this is an example of quid pro quo harassment. Whether Roger likes or appreciates Marie's offer makes no difference. Okay, and we'll look at one more. Martha is very attracted to her boss, Dan. Since they're both single, she asked him over for dinner one Friday evening. After a very pleasant evening and a few too many drinks, they ended up spending the night together. Could this be considered sexual harassment? So I'm just going to wait a moment and type. Let's see what folks think. Okay, so I'm not seeing, this one might actually be a little more, not as clear, because some of these scenarios, so I see a bunch of no's, coming in here. And so actually the answer is no, but as one person in a workshop said, it should be considered, quote, dumb and dangerous. Supervisors and their subordinates getting involved romantically is not a good idea. It sets up a situation with all sorts of potential problems in the future, among them sexual harassment. So, again, these examples are really, I think all of these are really asking people to think about what are the possible consequences, even if they're unintended consequences at the time or at the moment. Could there be a potential, ethical question or a power differential question that, down the road could, cause difficulties? Okay. So let's take a little bit of a shift here and take a look at thinking about workplace violence, which is a topic now that is, common in the media. We see that information a lot. And oftentimes it's really sort of glorified in the media, the examples, and there's many, many, many situations that occur on a regular basis that are, will not lead to a potential violent act. But, nonetheless, we all need to be aware of and educated on the assault cycle, if you will, and how violence can potentially grow. So if we just take a look here, at some of the steps that, first there may be an individual has a traumatic experience, or at least how they perceive an event or situation to be that really has an impact on them. And that could be at the workplace or not at the workplace. And then secondly, the traumatized individual will project responsibility. So instead of looking at their own actions, they'll externalize and put that responsibility on other people or an outside organization or combination. The person's thinking turns inward and really becomes more sort of inward focused. Like egocentric would really mean like a little more really just thinking about solely their experience and solely themselves without necessarily like checking in with other people to kind of balance out if they're thinking, or other people thinking and perceiving it in the same light, so they really kind of turn more inward. And sort of the final step is the person may look to attempt or commit some kind of a violent act. So let's just take a step back here and just look at early on in the process, what possibly could come up. So some examples are, refusing, say, to cooperate with an immediate supervisor, maybe behavior that other coworkers notice as consistently being argumentative or belligerent with, say, customers or clients, really spreading harmful rumors about other people, maybe making unwanted sexual comments or other kinds of behavior that we just went through in the case examples that is unwarranted. And then as these feelings grow, there could potentially be an increasing number of arguments with customers, vendors, coworkers, and management. You may see a refusal to comply with company policies and procedures. There may be, for instance, behavior that sabotages equipment or property at the workplace. There may be some verbal wishes to harm or hurt somebody at work. And then as violence escalates, there may be, again, where it's this fourth step, that there is some kind of like an actual act that occurs that is violent in nature, either a physical fight or destruction of property or bringing in a weapon. So, let's take a look at, what are some of the things or the signs to watch out for. And I really want to make a note here that caution must be used when, using a profile, say, to try to look at some indicators of a potentially violent employee or an aggressive employee, because the profile is really not reliable, because just because, say, an employee may fit part of the profile or even many of the indicators, it doesn't necessarily mean that he or she will actually become violent. So for every employee who does become violent in the workplace and fits a profile, there are probably 100 who match the profile and will never become violent. Okay, so I want to say that again. Okay, for every one employee who may become violent, 100 will never become violent. Okay, so in other words, we want to use this cautiously, because we really don't have specific profiles that are good predictors of who will or who will not become violent. So forensic psychiatrist Park Dietz argues that past workplace rampages were committed by men and women of all races and ages, and relying on profiles carries a twofold risk. The first being that people will be wrongly accused as dangerous, and others will be disregarded because they simply don't fit that profile. So one of the best methods really for detecting a potential violence is to be a good observer, okay, what to watch for, of behavior, and then to be aware of, has there been a significant change or deviation from that person's like normal behavior. So if we look at the first point here on the slide, determining what is normal for any given individual, for that particular individual. And being a good observer of, again, any unusual behavior or like a very significant change in routine or demeanor. But if we think about that too, depending, we might be under some additional work stress or home stress. And so, again, you really want to be cautious about this. It might just mean that, a manager would need to talk with an employee and, say, direct them to additional help or resources, say, through the EAP, for example. So you really want to, again, be very mindful about this, to be understanding of personal situations. So unusual or abnormal behavior might be a change in routine, for example. There might be a significant change in demeanor, how the person socializes, or how they normally interact, like a real significant change. Changes from normal to abnormal behavior may be caused by both known and unknown events. And these changes can be either rapidly coming on, acute, or they can be going on chronically for some time. I'm going to invite people again now to, type in the chat box here, or if you'd like to ask a question, you can unmute your line if you'd prefer to do it that way. Of what are also some other possible indicators in terms of what to watch out for? So, in other words, knowing when an instance starts to escalate, and then there is time to diffuse a situation, to intervene, for example, to know where to go for help. So I'm going to continue, but I'll invite people to just kind of add their comments in. Some examples that I'm thinking about that typically have come up in the workplace is hygiene issues, for instance. If there's, physical hygiene, poor physical hygiene that either coworkers or clients or customers really make a note of, and they start really complaining about that. It may not mean that somebody is going to be potentially violent, for instance, but it might mean there's an indicator something might be going wrong or something going on there that you might want to check into. Other kinds of changes that people have noticed is if people are regularly falling asleep, for example, at meetings, not just oh, I'm tired in the middle of the day and I need a pick-me-up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? That's a normal slump. We might need something to eat or to pick us up. But where somebody's really, so again, just kind of looking at, or if somebody is frequently late, and if there seems to be a pattern of either lateness or absence on certain days of the week. I see here some other comments that people have written in is sudden changes in personality, for sure, outbursts, or again, easily agitated, that person might perceive, acts, that they perceive everything very personal. So, some innocuous act is, perceived as they feel slighted, most of the time, and they feel somehow the world is against them or everybody's against them, that type of thought process. So it's worth mentioning here, knowing the difference between what's called disillusioned employees, disaffected, and then disgruntled employees. Okay. So disillusioned employees are folks that are disappointed about work-related issues such as not getting a promotion or other kinds of, say, organizational changes that might be occurring. Disaffected employees are discontent and may find that their motivation is not in line with the organization's. Disgruntled employees are angry. So most disgruntled employees function well except in one area. They have an overwhelming need to reach their own goals regardless of right or wrong behavior. Okay. So here is a question. Why is it sometimes difficult to do the right thing? Right? In other words, how do we intervene, right? Doing the right thing, like reporting concerns. What might be the consequences of acting or not acting when one observes behavior that's threatening? Okay. So again, I'm going to invite people to think about that question. What makes it hard to do the right thing? Right? What are some of the concerns? And then what could be some of the potential consequences, say, for not reporting to the appropriate, knowing where to go for help, for example, to your human resources department or your manager, and then what could be the potential consequences of reporting. Okay. So I see some, comments coming in, retaliation. That might be certainly, I think that's a fear, common fear that people have. Like they don't want, like if somebody finds out, they don't want to be the one to be like, oh, you're the one that said something or reported, which normally should never happen. That should not happen. It should be confidential, and that wouldn't be the case. I see here comments coming in of people could get hurt, potentially if nothing is done, right, if like the signs are ignored, right. I see here also it may open a can of worms, and then you have to deal with a whole new slew of problems, which, that's also very common. It's kind of like, okay, once we open up like that box, that Pandora's box or that can of worms, like, what do we do? And then we'll have to deal with that situation. But, the consequences, again, of not, acting or not responding, really could be severe. And a lot of this now we're going to talk about, how to be able to, communicate and effectively problem solve. So it really is everyone's responsibility, employees, supervisors, and managers who witness or experience any workplace violence situation, including threats of violence, that they must report the incident through the established organizations or companies reporting procedures to the appropriate authorities. So it's true, I see a comment here, if you don't report it, you could be held responsible. And I think one way to think about this is just by reporting a concern, that doesn't mean that you as an individual is saying this is definitely happening or that this is a problem. In other words, you're not drawing a conclusion about anybody or anything. You're just simply reporting, these are my concerns. I don't know, what exactly is going on, but, this is the behavior. So being able to separate out, like, the behavior that you're concerned about from the individual. Like, this is the behavior or this is the pattern of behavior that has been coming up. These are the times, these are the dates, and I'm concerned about this behavior and what to do. So really everyone is responsible at the workplace for making and reporting observations and taking measures that help to facilitate and ensure a secure workplace that is free from violence and threats of violence. So now let's talk about what are some actions that contribute to workplace health. And really some of these are very simple actions, but what ends up happening a lot of times is if there is other time demands and we have to meet deadlines and we have certain job responsibilities and constraints, and there's a lot of change going on that, because of those pressures, individuals, we all, have to cope in whatever way that we know how to cope. So oftentimes, maybe being as courteous as we normally would, think about being, et cetera, at times can be challenging. So I'm just going to ask folks to think about on this slide, what some of the points on here is, what has been your experience with these? Assuming personal responsibility, being courteous, folks being able to engage in honest and respectful communication, valuing differences, and then having fun, okay? So what has been your experience with these? Are they easy to do? Why or why not? Do they agree? Do you agree that engaging in this behavior contributes actually to a healthier workplace? And then finally, would you add anything else that's not on the list here? Maybe we would want to add some things. So I see comment coming in, trying to be courteous and respectful to everyone, even if you may not like them as a person. And so really this begs us to move forward to, the next slide, which is on workplace civility. And really, taking a look at, what would have been at one point, what we would say, this is just, polite manners or good manners. And in today's, for many of us, we're in more informal workplace settings, and there's been so many different technological changes that impact how we interact with one another, that some of these points, sometimes get lost or forgotten along the way. So really, for this point here, I'd like everyone to just really think about being mindful is very important, and really being aware of what your own individual responses are and your own individual behavior, because that can really go a long way in shaping an interaction. So again, we're thinking here of that golden rule of treating others, right, as we ourselves would like to be treated. Even if you're not as friendly with somebody, you can still be courteous, and you could still be polite, and you could still be cordial, okay? And so if we take a look at just some of the points here, that first impressions really do make a difference. So how someone is dressed and, your specific behavior send lasting impressions which remain with the other person, sometimes irregardless of future positive reactions. So it's really important to make a good first impression, because a lot of our communication actually comes from nonverbal and face-to-face interactions. Many of it comes from that. Good manners may make or break actually a career. So promotions and raises are likely to be denied to employees who are consistently rude to superiors, subordinates, peers, and customers. Poor manners are distracting. Coworkers can become distracted, right, by employees with poor manners. Productivity and good work relationships suffer. Good manners actually set the tone for work relationships, and these are simply building blocks for good relationships. And finally, good manners make life at work simply just more pleasant. When we demonstrate awareness of others, respect towards them, and empathy for them, all necessary behaviors when we're sharing a common space, we're more likely to behave in kind, making everything more pleasant. And so I'm going to invite people once again to maybe add what are some examples of those behaviors, at the workplace. So one of the ones I'm thinking of is just simply saying good morning with a smile. Just something as simple as that, good morning with a smile. That's acknowledging someone. A smile actually takes less muscles in our face to use than a frown, so that's good. And it just is a very different feeling, right, when we actually have a smile from somebody, right? Good morning, or, have a good day, or, it was nice talking with you, making good eye contact with somebody, just really those minimal engagers, holding open the door for somebody, right? Here I see some comments coming in. Yeah, saying thank you when someone holds the elevator or the door. Saying to somebody, have a good day, when you're walking with somebody. Those, little, quote, those little behaviors go really a long way. You get a lot of bang for your buck just by doing that. And being able to communicate in a respectful and as well as an assertive way, which is part and parcel of engaging at workplace relationships as well as other relationships that we have. Seeing here some other comments are also coming in, which I liked from the last slide. It's helpful to allow a new team member to make their own first impressions hmm Instead of others giving them their impressions of others. Yeah, absolutely. So if we can be mindful about that, that way the judgment, right? It's not like hearing other information and then there's already like a preconceived possible notion, right, of somebody coming in. It's like almost like you already have a certain expectation. If we get, particularly with negative information, it really, really goes a long way. So, how we learn to deal with conflict is really super important, and because conflict is a part of life, and conflict comes up in all kinds of relationships, and certainly it comes up at work. And so sometimes when we think of conflict, people feel nervous about it, or it's very common for people to be like, I hate conflict, right, or I don't like conflict, I don't like to deal with conflict. But the truth of the matter is that conflict is a part of life. Conflict is inevitable, and conflict doesn't necessarily have to mean a negative thing, because it would be boring. Think about it. If everybody had the same way of looking at things, or the same opinions about everything, or viewed the problems or solutions in the same way, it would be kind of boring. And there's less creativity then that happens. And so the tendency is that sometimes people will avoid it, particularly working in a team. You don't want to hurt the other person's feelings or offend somebody. But what happens if that continually goes on? What could be the consequences if conflict is never really addressed? Like you're really not dealing with, quote, the elephant in the room, right? Everyone's kind of just dancing around that, right? So it's all really how you deal with the conflict. And let's just take a look at the difference between assertive communication and then aggressive communication and then also passive. Because sometimes people feel uncomfortable, they'll say, with being assertive. And oftentimes, the reason that is they don't really understand what assertive communication is. So they're really viewing assertive communication in the aggressive category, and they're putting those two together, but they're very, very different. So if we take a look here at the categories, right, on the left, passive communication is somebody who extends and they don't feel entitled to say their own opinions, their own rights, accepts responsibilities, and maybe some of those responsibilities, I would add to that it's like an oversense of responsibility, so it's like always accepting that somehow they're in the wrong or they're the ones to, blame if something doesn't go correctly. So they kind of, give in, that kind of passive communication. That's not really helpful. And if we go all the way to the right and looking at aggressive communication, right, these are individuals that are very demanding, right? They don't know, then they don't extend that right or the courtesy to other people. So they don't accept responsibility. So aggressive communication, you could think of it as like it's my way or the highway, right? It can be intimidating kind of behavior, and it really pushes people back. It's hard to communicate with somebody who communicates aggressively. So what we're talking about here is being assertive. Assertive communication both exercises and extends rights and responsibilities to yourself as well as to others. Okay? So assertive communication here includes assuming responsibility for your own feelings, thoughts, opinions, and actions. It includes making I statements, so I meaning that I am feeling this way or I am thinking about the situation in this way. So it's taking ownership, okay, of your own feelings, thoughts, and opinions. It involves setting limits. It involves striving to meet your needs while also considering the needs of others. It includes being able to disagree, and it also includes respecting yourself and others. So if we think about applying assertive communication back to the area of, say, dealing with conflict or conflict resolution, okay, we can view it as assertiveness may be the most respectful way to address conflict. So the goal here is to find a solution to the problem which is mutually satisfying to the parties involved. So in other words, a win-win situation. Ideally, a win-win situation. Now, this may not always be possible. However, there are other outcomes that can serve to reduce the tension which conflict produces and still have a professional and cooperative working relationship. So it's okay, right? We can agree sometimes to disagree with somebody, right? We can agree that we might see things differently or we have a difference of opinion. So it's like we agree to disagree, and in some situations that can, solve the issue right there. Not all the time, but at least it's a place where you can agree to disagree, where it's not trying to push the other person or the other side to see it my way, right? That my way is the right way and your way is the wrong way. I mean, that's oftentimes what happens in conflict, right? We are trying to get the other person to see it or do it our way. And most of the times there's not one right way, right? There's not one right way or wrong way. There's many different ways to, fulfill a task or to accomplish a goal many times. And so it's, being tolerant of everyone's view. So as we're thinking about, conflict, we know that it's part of life, okay? It can be messy, okay? It can feel uncomfortable, okay? But conflict can also be a wonderful opportunity for change and growth as well. So if we just now take a look at also some additional tools to effective problem solving in, say, dealing with conflict resolution, let's take a look and even clarify this some more. And these are some of the general steps that are involved to effective problem solving, whatever the problem is. So the first one is really defining the problem because, even though that might seem like a simple task, I think many of us know that that's actually sometimes quite challenging, and particularly if we have different viewpoints, to actually define what the problem is, right, can pose a challenge. So you want to gather the information, relate the facts, offer your interpretation of the facts, and then explain how you feel about the situation. What's your viewpoint? And then you want to give the other person an opportunity to respond, okay? And a simple step here is listening to their response, okay? Many times when we try to defend our position, it's harder for us to listen because we're trying to think of the next thing to say. So listening to the other person's response. How does the other person feel? How do they see the problem? How do they interpret the facts? Being able to identify and organize the issues. And part of that could be involving questions to ask, such as, is it possible to change the situation or to compromise, for example? If the situation cannot be changed, can you or the other person accept it? So here it's really understanding your interests and finding a solution and then brainstorming as many alternatives as possible. Okay? And then being able to set in priority, say, the ranking of assessing the preferred options. What are some of the priorities that both parties could agree on trying to implement. So when a solution is agreed upon by both parties, either through a willingness to change on one person's part or through a compromise by both parties, put the agreement in writing so that we both are aware of the terms of the agreement. Part of that might be identifying difficult aspects of the solutions as you're developing that consensus, right, among the parties. So expecting improvements to happen all at once, that like say change happens all at once, is really not a realistic goal. So improvements happen mostly in small increments. So particularly during the early stages, say, of the problem-solving process, you really want to encourage changes that occur, no matter how small. You may see the changes happening with positive feedback, okay, and to avoid criticism as much as possible. So when you know that the person or persons are capable of keeping the agreement, he or she may continue to break it. You would state the consequence and, most importantly, follow through. And, that's the one that oftentimes, people struggle with, is once an agreement is reached and then what both parties agreed on doesn't occur, then it has to be clear what the potential consequences or what the results would be if it's not followed. Okay. So I don't know here as well if there are any additional comments to effective problem solving that people want to add in. And I'm just keeping an eye in terms of where we're at, because I wanted to leave a few minutes at the end as well for additional comments or questions that people might have. So as we are going towards summarizing and wrapping up today, I'd like for everybody to think about what are the elements of a healthy workplace. And in terms of thinking about that, I'd like to, have some comments, coming in terms of what your experiences have been in healthy workplaces, and what are some elements that you think could be added to contribute to overall healthy organizational factors. And part of that is actually having fun, okay? So in today's fast-paced world, sometimes it's often challenging, to be able to sort of incorporate that into our lives, but it is really super, super important to be able to do that. Okay. So I see other comments are actually coming in. Before we get to that, I'm going to just switch back to this because I see a lot of good comments coming in. I see here in terms of the elements of a healthy workplace, honest communication with one another, having a helpful team. Another comment of being respectful and valuing each other, so there's like a cohesive team unit. Absolutely, all of those are important. And then, so part of that cohesiveness, right, we can kind of go back to here, right, is developing, say team morale or, right, team cooperation. Having a cohesive team is being able to take the time to have fun, right, with your team members. Fun, humor, laughter, right, are all really therapeutic tools and really are useful in many, many ways. So I'd like to ask folks to think about how do you have fun in the workplace, actually, and also maybe how do you feel about having fun in the workplace, Because sometimes this area is so frequently misunderstood, right? When people allow themselves to have fun and lighten up, whether it's at work or home, they actually seem to be able to go forward with new energy and creativity, right? It opens up doors. It opens up some new life. It opens up some new channels oftentimes. And building in a healthy dose of fun in both your professional and your personal life helps to keep that energy and the creativity flowing. So we have some examples here, being able to keep fit, physically fit and move, exercise or some kind of movement in some way. If, being able to really just take care of ourselves physically in a good way, is very important. Coping with stress, right, that we all have. Stress is a part of life. It's not going away. It's not going anywhere. So ideally what we want to do is just learn to identify a toolkit of how we handle stress and developing a toolkit that contains different tools because depending on what the situation is, we may not be able to always use the same tool. So that's really important. As we talked about, communicating successfully, taking the time to really be respectful and mindful and think through how you want to communicate a response to someone, how you want to portray your own individual communication is very important. Will go a long way. And really enhancing life by learning and creativity. And I'd like to also ask folks here, what are some examples that you have found in your own personal life that helps in terms of having fun, which also spurs on, say, additional learning and creativity? So one area that I can give as an example is I use music a lot for myself, both personally and professionally, to really spur additional learning and creativity in my own practice. And that has been tremendously helpful and can lead to a lot of fun, a lot of camaraderie, and a lot of fun. So just as we as we close for today, just wanted to take a couple of moments to, again, reiterate and summarize the importance here of being mindful to maintain a healthy and safe work environment, and that everyone's role and everyone's part is important in maintaining and continually being able to grow that environment in healthy and great ways. And I just wanted to leave a couple of moments here if people wanted to unmute their lines to ask any questions or comments that you might have, or if you'd prefer to just type it into the chat feature and we can list them here.
Lynn, I did want to, sorry, this is Karen. I did want to bring up that we do have an employee activity committee, it's the EAC, that plans and coordinates monthly gatherings for the office employees to get together and just kind of visit with each other. Like last month we had it was like a hot dog social, an ice cream social in the afternoon, which gave people time to sit and talk to other employees, just to get some time away from their desk, just to kind of visit with everyone else that's here in the office. And I find it helpful to get to know other employees that are here in the office that you're sharing, 5 days a week with, to get to know them a little bit better.
Yes, absolutely. That's great information for everyone to have. And I also wanted to mention, Karen, here as well, and if you wanted to also give folks the details of the additional resources or information for the Employee Assistance Program services that's available.
Yeah. Yes. The program, the presentation that we're watching, going through right now is through United Healthcare. United Healthcare does offer an EAP program, but this is just a friendly reminder that we do have the EAP program through Unum, which is with Life Balance. And we did do a big mail out just a couple of weeks ago. We got new posters and posted them throughout the office, and emails were sent to everyone's work email address. So if you ever have any issues or concerns, either one of those EAP programs would be a good resource.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thanks, Karen. And also just very quickly, I know we're at the top of the hour, I just wanted to add, sometimes there's a question about if somebody calls the EAP and, they want the information to be confidential, if they're talking through something, and that it is, right, that the EAPs are all confidential, that information doesn't go back to the organization.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Yep. Well, thank you, everybody. I think that brings us to the top of the hour.
Okay. Lynn, thank you so much for presenting. I just want to give everyone a reminder that this presentation is being recorded. So if you ever want to revisit it or go over something that was discussed, it's going to be located on the portal. And there's also a workbook that's also going to be posted out on the portal that you can get at any time.
Yes, thank you, Karen. And I wanted to say thank you, everyone, for participating in our webinar today. And I'm going to wish everyone to have a wonderful remainder of your day.
Thanks, Lynn. You have a good afternoon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.